So we are going to work with the TrueLight Glass and Aluminum Solutions catalog. And as with any catalog in GDS, you can, let me just get out of this, you can go to the vendor info link here on our menu and get all the information for that manufacturer. So it has their website, phone number, even a contact, their address, and all that. Something worth mentioning is this add to stock link value. This actually affects the optimizer, and any new catalog that we configure has this as 0. But if you've ever imported a catalog, if you've used our old version 14 program, that old software used this value and usually would have a 1-inch add to stock length. And that can be zeroed out if you're using that catalog in this new WinBidPro software. So just a quick note on that. The reason we did that is because in the parts list you can actually change the stock lengths on the fly or with a batch kind of update tool. And the old program didn't allow you to do that, so you don't need that add to stock length anymore. So let's go ahead and look at one of these framing systems in this TrueLight catalog. We'll go ahead and just pick this first one. It's a 1 3/4 by 4 1/4-inch glass system screw spline. And remember, there are videos of the previous webinars we've done on our website on the training page, and you can watch those at any time. And I'm going to maximize the screen on this. And so we've already gone through the first 2 tabs. We've gone through the parts list, the glass table. So now we're on the gasket caulking tab and the clips and miscellaneous. So now this is a very simple system. So it's a storefront 1/4-inch glass system. So all we're using right here in the vinyl tab is one part number of one type of vinyl times 2. So we went over this in the last video where you can use an *2 or an asterisk time, which is basically times however many times you want this part used. So I could have put this part in twice, or I can use ×2, and it makes it a little simpler. And if you go to the tips here on the main profile tab, if you remember, this tip talks about doing things like that. So that will remind you. Actually, here's a tip too on that tab. So I'm sorry. The tip right here on the stock length material tab is the one that talks about using the star symbol for things like multiple parts. So if you want to part multiple times, you would use that star symbol. You'll notice there's a little red. The number 1 for this row is red, so that indicates it's being used multiple times. And so as with the other tabs that have part configurations, you can always click in any tab or any column here and right-click in this box area. Wherever it says right-click, you just do it in that box. It brings up your parts list, and then you can go search for a part to add to that column. So if I'm looking for sill, vinyl, or gasket, there's a couple things I can do. I can type in gasket first of all to filter for that, and then I can even type in sill. But typically, it depends on how the manufacturer is describing their parts in the description field here. So a lot of them are going to say this is sill gasket material. So you would have to know kind of what you're looking for with the manufacturer. But so these are all gaskets, and if it's gasket for a certain system like the CG400, we could always try typing that too. So CG4, and that's going to get me a little closer to the type of gasket I need. So let's say I want to add this gasket to the sill vinyl column there. I just click on the part, click insert, and there it is. And I could always have it once, or I can use my asterisks, have it appear twice, and the program will pick up the multiple that we're adding to this part. So that's the easy way to add a part number. Of course, if you know the part number, you can always add it. So I can type in RG-, let's say I know it's a 4. But if I'm wrong and the part's not there, then we can actually say, yes, I want to add it now. because it's something that it's a new part. Let's say the catalog is a year or two old, like this one's a 2012. If they came out with some new parts and they haven't given us an update yet, it's easy for you to add stuff to the catalog you're using. So keep that in mind. I can always add this part. I can call it, new 1/4 inch. It doesn't want us to do a, it doesn't like us to put certain symbols in the description because it interferes with the program. So I would put 0.25 gasket. Or I could put 0.25 glazing gasket. So I can do that. I can tell it what type of part it is by, I can either say vinyl or a gasket. If you type a letter, it'll jump to that section of the list. And then you can, of course, put the price. And you only need to put the price in once for something like hardware or gasket material. So if I add, and another key point here for any gasket stuff, it's always going to be by the foot. So when we add a part that's vinyl or gasket material or weather stripping or anything like that, we're going to do by the foot. So it's 25 cents a foot, let's say. And then another key item in this little window, if we're adding parts, is we need to put the number of feet per roll. So the package quantity in the case of vinyl is feet. And so usually they're either 250 or 500 feet rolls, foot rolls. So the multiplier, of course, is, what's your discount on that? You can do a drop down here, and then later you can type a different multiplier in if you want. This is something that reminds me we should make this a little different. You should just be able to type in whatever value you want. So we'll look at that in the next update. But so now I'm basically adding this part to my master list. So anytime I'm adding a part, it's going to the master list. But at the same time, the part's getting added to the job, or I'm sorry, to this framing system. So if I hit OK, now I've got my RG4 part. And now I could say I want to use that same gasket material for, say, a left wall jamb. I could type RG-4, hit Tab, and it accepts it because I've added it to my master list. So that's how easy it is just to add things to your framing system. And again, we're working with a master framing system. So I'm going to get out of it here real quick. So I was in the main window here, and I hit Framing Systems from the Master menu. And if you remember from some of our other videos, I could have hit Elevation Frame System either here or over here on the menu, and it would open up just this Elevations Framing System configuration. But in this case, we're working with the Master, and that means any job we create after this is going to use the configuration I'm making right here. So I'm going to make this bigger. So we'll go back here. It's got our parts that we've added. So perimeter caulking. So that's something, usually caulking's in a tube. So let's see if we can find, I click in that field and then I right click. I want to see if I can find caulking. So I'm going to type, oops. Okay, so it's not that. I'm going to see if I can type sealer. So seal tape. I mean, usually you might buy that from a different company. If it's 3M or something else, you can just add that to the catalog as well. So in this case, 3M silicone. Let's say I'm adding this part, and I hit enter. It says, okay, it's not in there. I'm going to say yes, I want to add it. I'll do my standard multiplier. So here's another case where I am going to price it by the foot. So I need to decide, and I realize there's different beads that you can lay with caulking. It could be a 3/8 bead or a 1/4 inch bead or whatever, but you have to try and just guesstimate how much of the caulking you're going to use per foot. So let's say a tube of caulking gives you 20 feet, and you're going to divide the cost of that tube of caulking out by the foot and come up with a price. So maybe it's 50 cents a foot. That might even be a little high, but let's say it's 30 cents a foot. So then we're going to go down here and we're going to say it's caulking. And then we're going to say the package quantity is how many feet. So if it was 20 feet, I'm going to put a 20 there. And this is a little weird because it's going to figure the caulking by the foot in the program, but you can tell the parts report to price it by the package. So in this case, a package is 1 tube. So, and then I would say price, let's just say 3M caulking by the tube. And we'll know that that basically means 20 cents or 20 feet per tube for this. So that's how you would kind of configure your own caulking for any job. If you add it to your master parts list, like I just did right there, I'm adding it to this framing system in the master list. So now anytime I pick this framing system for a job, it's going to include caulking for the perimeter. And then it's going to price it by the foot, but we'll get to the parts list in a second, and I'll remind you where that little checkbox is to do it by the package. So that is helpful for you if you want to configure your own perimeter caulking. So then here's one of the most important things about this tab here is the glazing vinyl. So glazing vinyl is the vinyl that touches all sides of the glass. So basically it's the vinyl that holds the glass into the frame. But you don't want to apply that type of vinyl. Anything that's, around the whole perimeter of a piece of glass, it's all one type of vinyl. You don't want to tell it that RG1 is horizontal vinyl, it's vertical vinyl, it's wall jamb vinyl. So you don't want to enter that vinyl into each component because it's not going to calculate the footage correctly. So this little column here, glazing vinyl, was intentionally added so that it could figure the perimeter of the glass and the daylight perimeter of the glass, not the actual glass size. So it's going to give you the actual footage of vinyl for the perimeter of the glass based on the daylight opening. And that's exactly what you want for glazing vinyl. So that's why that was the only part number here, and that's why it's used for putting the glass in. So if there is vinyl that's needed for other components, like if there's some sort of head cap that has, or face cover or something on the head or horizontal that has its own type of vinyl, and it's not really holding the glass in, it's just sealing the cap to the glass or something, then that's something that you would put in these columns. So in this case, any type of vinyl that's added here, like this sill vinyl, if it's an interrupted sill, let's say the verticals are interrupting a sill, it's going to figure out the feet of vinyl based on the actual feet of the sill material. So same thing goes with vertical and wall jambs. So it's going to be a continuous length of vinyl, the full length of that wall jamb. So however many feet or inches that wall jamb is, that's just, the vinyl's going to match it. So that's why glazing vinyl is a little different. If you're adding vinyl or gasket around the glass, it's not including the joint where the horizontal meets the jamb or the horizontal meets the vertical. So it's going to give you a few extra inches every time there's a horizontal or another, door head or something if it's a vertical piece. So that's why we're not adding it here. It's a little confusing, but I can show you more in a second. So let's get to this section real quick. So per elevation, that's a very generic place to add just miscellaneous parts. If there's something that isn't accounted for, with say per horizontal, per sill, per head, this could be screws, water deflectors, end dams, things like that. End dams you can put, one per jamb or something like that. Or let's say there's only 2 end dams per elevation. Then I would put the end dam part right here. So it's already flashing in that field. Let's see if we can find a dam part. Adams. Let's see if we can find an end load assembly, end dam. So here's an end dam here. If I want to add 2 of those per elevation, I'm just going to add that part times 2, and right away I've got the right number of end dams for this. So now per head, so each head piece, if it's an interrupted head, that means each piece is going to get that part. And if you put it times 2, it's going to get 2 of them. So it's pretty straightforward. Now the one difference in here, instead of per individual part, is per joint. So you'll see that assembly screws for a screw spline system are always going to be entered per joint. So it knows that any intersection of one member to another, screws are required, and it counts up those joints just automatically in the program. So that's why we would add them here. We don't have to go through the trouble of adding screws to each component because it figures the right number of joints and it knows that 2 screws are needed per joint. So that's something here. Now, per entrance is a little redundant because you have control over parts in the door frame and the door leaf section of the program. And the future webinars will cover those screens, but you'll notice that they're very similar in terms of you're able to add stock lengths, you're able to add parts per member, and you're able to add kind of universal parts to an entire entrance or a door frame. So it's just something extra. If you know every time you have an entrance using this type of framing system and it needs a certain piece of hardware or something, you can add it here. So that's kind of a generic place to add some entrance parts. Now, so face clips. This is one unique thing about this section, this tab in the framing system window. Face clips are something that can be applied every given number of inches. So if I put 12 here and I put a part number, so I'm going to right click in here and look for a clip. I could even look for a face clip. Let's see here. Yeah, it's not going to do 2. So face division bar, face, I don't know, just anything. I'm just going to pick something. So I'm going to pick that part. Let's say that's a face clip. Now the program knows that every lineal foot of this elevation, of whatever elevation I build with this system, every 12 inches is going to pick up this part. So it's going to figure out however many lineal feet of exposed material on that elevation, whether it's horizontals, head sills, jambs, anything. It's going to figure out every 12 inches, give it one of these parts. So that's unique. It doesn't always have to be face clips, but just realize that whatever value you put here, if I put a 10, it's going to say every 10 inches. And when I point to some of these fields like this one here, it tells us enter decimal inches. Well, that's a little generic, but here it says clip part field to save any changes to the clip spacing. So really it's clip spacing, but it's every 10 inches it knows to pick one of these parts up. So whatever value you put in there, that's however many inches it's going to measure out. Now, per splice at jam, per splice at vertical. So that's only going to apply for elevations that are taller than a stock length or elevations that you've manually entered a splice point in. So wherever there's a splice point in an elevation, you can tell it certain part numbers to use. And you can have different part numbers for the jams than you do for the verticals for those splices. So that's kind of another unique column of fields, for parts in this tab. So remember, that's only going to be picked up when a splice exists in an elevation. And the splices can either be entered manually or automatically if the elevation is taller than a stock length. So here's our splice tab right here. This is how I would enter them manually. So even if we have a 110-inch elevation, I can tell it I want a splice to be at 80 inches. So when I tab out of that and redraw, now we can see right here, these lines here, these horizontal lines below the horizontal are actual splice points. So that's when the program would pick up those parts from the framing system. So that's how that works. So now to go back to this framing system. Now if I want this framing system, all the changes I just made, and let's get back into it and see what else we got. If I want these changes to be made to the job I am doing, then I need to apply this framing system to the job I already have. So I'll show you how to do that. So I think that's pretty straightforward. That's pretty much everything for the parts. Per horizontal 3 and 4. So you know that there's different horizontals. here we have horizontal 2, 3, and 4. The standard horizontal is picked up just by per horizontal, is that right here. So then we've got our extra horizontals that if we do put part numbers here and we tell the program to use those horizontals in the drawing, in an elevation, then we can actually have the stock lengths that make those horizontals up, and then we can have hardware that gets applied to those horizontals. So a little bit of flexibility there, but your standard horizontal parts, if there's anything unique to those horizontals, that can be entered in here too. So again, this is for clip screws, miscellaneous hardware, and then we've got our gasket material that's the same thing. So let's see how this works when I want to apply it to a job I've already got. So now this job is using the frame 4144, but the one we were just working on was what? That was frame 64. So I am going to go to Jobs, and then I'm going to go to Current Job, Update Utilities, and I'm going to say I want to edit. Well, there's a couple ways to do it. I can apply an elevation to the entire job by hitting Change to New Frame System, or if it's just one elevation, I can edit the elevation and change the frame. So this way I'm already here, so I'm just going to go ahead and change the frame for the entire job. I'm going to click that first one, hit Select. Now it's going to update the job with that framing system that I just selected. It's going to redraw the elevation, and then I can hit Select here to get back to the elevation screen. So there was only one elevation here. The other way I could have done it was gone to Elevations. It's showing me the elevation in the job. I could have hit Edit Settings and hit Select Frame and changed it then. A few more steps, but that's how I could have done it. So now to confirm that we have all those changes, I can hit Edit Elev Frame System. I can go in. We didn't really change anything on this screen, but I can go in here, and I didn't change anything there either. But here I did. So I added the RG4 vinyl in a couple spots. I added the silicone. And then in here, I added the per elevation and the face clip. So all the changes I made are here. Now what we're going to do is, let's say we're done making our changes. I can go to the optimizer. I can get my elevation parts. And then I can optimize. So you'll notice none of the miscellaneous parts or the gasket material is ever going to show up in the optimizer. The only time it would is if we actually put gasket material in the stock length tab. Like let's go back to that. So right here, if we're in the stock length tab right here, and on say my right wall jamb, I right-clicked down here to bring up the parts list, and I was looking at gasket material like this, I could actually add gasket material to the stock length tab for my right wall jamb, but the problem is it's going to think it's stock length, it's a stock length part. So the program, even though we tell it it's priced by the foot and it has a package quantity of 500 feet or something like that, the program is going to think it's a 288-inch stock length component. So it's going to cut it up in the optimizer. It's going to price it as a stock length. It's basically not going to treat it correctly. So keep that in mind, that the optimizer is designed for stock length. The stock length tab is designed for stock length material, and so is the optimizer. And the gasket and miscellaneous parts tabs are designed specifically for those types of materials. So that's the difference. So now if we jump back to the final parts report, we're going to see all the things that I added. Here's the RG4. So right now it's saying there's 18 feet of gasket for the RG4 based on where I've entered it. And my silicone, here's my silicone. So there's 48 feet of silicone that should match up to the frame perimeter. So see down here on the left bottom corner of any time you're looking at an elevation on the screen, it always gives you a few stats in the left corner. So frame perimeter is one of them, and it's showing me 48 feet there. I've got 48 feet of silicone, so that's perfect. So now I where is my price here? Let me make this bigger. So yeah, $7.20 for a tube. You know, that's at my 50% multiplier. So that's how that's working. And what else can we show you here? So screw setting blocks, I forget what I added per elevation, but so everything, you don't have to optimize for anything like that to show up. So all you have to do, like let's say I get in here and edit my elevation framing system again. Let's say I take out, oops, let's say, oh, I don't want that in the sill, or I decided I didn't need that gasket material. I still need my perimeter caulking, but I didn't need that other gasket material. So now it's going to give me the warning that I probably need to redraw, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, because redrawing is what actually calculates the miscellaneous parts, not the optimizer. So now that I've redrawn, I should be able to go back into here, and my RG4 is gone. So you'll notice I didn't go in the optimizer, I just redrew the elevation, and it took care of it. So if you ever find a part that's showing up in here that shouldn't be, there might be a chance that you made a change to an elevation framing system, but you didn't redraw the elevation, so the change wasn't picked up. And the redraw thing is kind of a nuisance, but it's something that's needed for the type of database that this program runs on. So sometimes it won't update it as quickly as it can, or as it should, when you get out of a screen. So redrawing it forces it to go through the process of updating itself again. So I know it's not very logical, but that's kind of how it has to work. So that's why we put that little message up there. When I go in and make a change to the framing system for an elevation, you know, I might change something like, even if I want to change the sill to a 4-inch, excuse me, a 4-inch sill for just this elevation, and let's say I want to get rid of this add deduct for verticals, which in this case we didn't need anyway, but let's say I make that change. You'll notice it flashed the screen, but it didn't change my sill yet. So I'm going to have to close this window and hit redraw, and now it changed my sill. So that's an example of the program not updating itself as quickly as it needs to, and then redrawing it forces it to do it. So something to be aware of. Kind of a little idiosyncrasy, I guess, about our program, but it is an easy thing to deal with this redraw button. So that's about it. I think we're pretty much done with that part of the framing system parts. Now remember, anything I change, like I just took out those RG4 parts, if I go back to my master list here and I edit that first framing system, which is where we picked it when we added it to that job, you'll notice it still has that negative 1/8 inch, and it still has the RG4s. So when I made those changes, I was only making the changes to this elevation. So that same thing goes if I have 5 more elevations in my job and I change it here, it's not going to update the other 5. So you just need to be aware of where you're changing those types of things and where you want them to be applied. And then remember that if it's something that you want to apply to the entire job, go ahead and change it in the master and then reapply the framing system to the entire job. And that way it's the least amount of steps. So that pretty much concludes this webinar. Now we can go ahead and do questions and answers if you like. So you can type in questions or raise your hand. I need to get to, let's see here. I need to get to the screen where I can see everything. Let me maximize this. And so type either some questions, or you can go ahead and try raising your hand. Trying to figure out how to stop the recording too. Let's see here.